Good morning, Pastor Rusty. And here are some thoughts from the pastor. I was reading in Matthew chapter 7. Of course, I love Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount, and all the great teachings of Christ. And he's teaching people about his kingdom and how it's going to be different than the world that they were living in at that time. And it's true. When the Spirit of God moves into our life, we approach life differently if we'll allow ourselves to be led by the Spirit. Well, that's one of the conditions that Christ kind of puts on things as he's going through, that things are going to be different or not the same as they have been in the past. And he talks about giving good gifts. And he gets down to verse 13 and verse 14. A couple of verses that are very interesting to me because the different gospel writers have kind of a different take on this passage. And so he says, "Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction. And there are many who enter in through it. For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are few who find it." Now, I've struggled with this verse for years now because I've always heard it my whole life preached as this is a heaven and hell passage. It's like the salt water and the sweet water passage, or the two trees, the good tree and the bad tree. And that's an interesting thought too, because he says later on, you're going to know them by their fruits. And that's an amazing thing. There's a good tree and there's a bad tree. And the way we tell is the fruit. And so you think about that. People talk about, that they follow Christ, or that they're a deacon somewhere, or that they're a Sunday school teacher somewhere, but then their life kind of catches you off guard sometimes. And you think, that's not the way you understand discipleship. Well, I think a lot of people mess up about discipleship. They're more worried about getting their ticket punched than they are actually walking the path. And so listen to what he says: "Enter in through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction. And few there be that find the narrow way." And here's the thing: the broad way that leads to destruction is the simple path. The word that is used here for narrow means one thing in the Greek, but when that word is translated from the Hebrew, it usually means distressing. So instead of narrow, if we put in the word distressing, and then the other one is compact. It's narrow, it's compact, it's distressing, and the gate is small and the way is narrow. So you got the narrow gate, hard to get through. You're going to have to get rid of some things to get through this gate. And I believe this is what Jesus is teaching about discipleship. He doesn't have only heaven and eternity in focus here. He's also focused on the everyday life of a believer. There are choices that we're going to have to make. Now, here's the difference in these two roads. The one road is easy. It's wide. It's smooth. It's flat. If you were traveling, from Kentucky to Florida, you're going to probably pick the interstates. The wide, smooth, flat, you can go faster and they're fairly straight. And that's the road you're going to travel. You're not going to pick the back road typically. Some people would. But the back road, it's narrow, it's winding, it's hard to get on, it's not fun. And that's what Jesus is teaching here. When we choose the life that we're going to walk, it's easy to pick the fun life. It's easy to pick the easy path. That's what he's talking about here, the wide way. It's what everybody else is doing. It's easy to fit in. It's easy to just do the things that everybody else is doing. But then Jesus calls us to a harder walk. And we need to not fool ourselves. He calls us to a harder walk. It's narrow and it's compact and it's distressing and it's off the norm. And see, that's the thing, is everybody wants to be on trend today. They want to be on trend with everything that they're doing. They want to fit in. They want to go along. They just accept whatever pop psychology is out there. And this is just the way I was made, blah, 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 blah. But Jesus says, listen, because I live in you, you have me to lead you through. He won't ask us to go anywhere that he doesn't lead us and walk with us and take us. But he's not leading us on this wide path. See, that's what makes it so difficult, is we've got to decide to make Jesus our master of today, not just hope for our future when we die, but master of today. And that's not always easy. And sometimes we've got to shed things. I can remember hiking at Natural Bridge in Kentucky, and there's a place that I think it was called Fat Man Squeeze as far as I remember. And it is in fact that. And I can remember, when I was a child, it was no big deal. But as I got larger and grew into an adult and to a heavy adult, it's got harder and harder to get through that. And you can imagine if you're carrying gear and you're carrying a lot of other things, at some point you're going to say, I can't get through here with all this baggage. That's the picture. That's the picture of being willing to shed some things, maybe poor thoughts, maybe poor attitudes, maybe sins that we just pack with us, that we just will not lay those down. Jesus is saying, listen, it's not easy. It's difficult. Begin to lay these things down. Take the harder path. Take the path that not everybody else is taking, because this is the path of discipleship. Now, this is also called life. The other one's called destruction. It's easy to get caught up in this world, and it leads to a destroyed life. It leads to destroyed mentality. It leads to not being where you need to be with Christ. And we're made to follow and walk with Christ. The suffering, the distresses, and the different things that come with the narrow path actually help us live a fulfilled life. It's living. It's not compromising, and it's not selling out. It's not destructive. It's a life focused on Christ. And when we get our brains wrapped around that, and we begin to say that, yes, there may not be many that walk the way that I'm going to walk, but this is the Christ way. When we grab a hold of that, and we incorporate it into our life. And yeah, there are times that we fail. There's sometimes that we just want it easier. And sometimes we just don't want to struggle with the world or struggle with these things. But that is where true Christians are forged, on the path that's narrow, where the gate is difficult. Remember that as you go into the week. I hope you have a great year. It's 2022. I'm excited about what it holds. I'll talk to y'all later.